Maybe it's better you can't have kids at your age. Women over 30 just produce defective babies anyway." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The clink of cutlery against my mother's good china suddenly sounded like nails on glass. I was sitting at the far end of my parents' dining table, napkin folded neatly in my lap, when his words landed like a slap. The roast chicken smell, the buttered rolls, the steam from the mashed potatoes. Everything seemed to thicken in the air, pressing against my chest. My sister's boyfriend leaned back in his chair, casual, almost bored, as if he just commented on the weather and not my body. He held his fork in one hand, swirling it through the gravy, eyes calmly fixed on me like I was some case study. "Ethan," my sister said, a little laugh caught in her throat. "She told you already. Don't be so intense." But she didn't look at me when she said it. She stared at her plate. "I'm just being honest," he replied, shrugging. "Somebody has to be." My mother's hand froze halfway to the basket of rolls. My father cleared his throat loudly, twice, the way he does when he wants to say something but doesn't want to start a fight. Across from me, my teenage nephew stared down at his phone, suddenly very interested in the blank screen. I felt the heat climb up my neck, burning the tips of my ears. I'd already given him more than he ever deserved. He'd asked, almost cheerfully, why my husband and I didn't have kids after 6 years of marriage. I'd swallowed my discomfort and answered with as much dignity as I could manage. "Infertility issues," I'd said, my voice steady, my eyes on my plate. "On which side?" he'd asked immediately, as if we were debating engines or warranties. I'd hesitated. The pause was all the answer he needed, but my sister had jumped in anyway, smiling like she was explaining a math problem. "On her side," she said, tipping her head toward me, and now here we were. Defective babies. "I didn't ask for your opinion," I said quietly, forcing each word out one by one so my voice wouldn't crack. He tilted his head and smiled. It wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile a person wears when they know they've hit a nerve and are curious what happens next. "It's not an opinion," he said. "It's biology. I read about it. Risks go up after 30. It's better you didn't have any yet. Just being brutally honest." Brutally honest. The phrase he loved to use like a badge. The same phrase my sister repeated whenever he turned one of his observations on me or my parents about Dad's weight, Mom's wrinkles, the old house needing real work if they ever wanted to sell it. He was just that way, she'd say with a little smirk. He didn't sugarcoat things. I pressed my fingertips into the edge of the table until they hurt. Under the soft yellow of the dining room chandelier, his face looked almost angelic. Clear skin, neat beard, shirt sleeves rolled just enough to show off a watch that cost more than my whole outfit. He looked like the sort of man people trusted at first glance. My husband's absence pressed on me unexpectedly then. His chair beside me was empty, the seat pushed in neatly. He'd texted earlier that he couldn't make it, something urgent at work, and I'd told him not to worry, that it was just family, just a quiet birthday dinner for my sister. I'd said I'd be fine. Now every cell in my body screamed at me for being that naive. "Ethan," my mother said finally, voice thin, "we don't really need to talk about all that at the table." "I'm not shaming her," he said, as if that were the most ridiculous accusation. "I'm just saying science is science. If she wanted kids, maybe she should have thought about it sooner." The room dipped into a silence so heavy I felt it pressing on my shoulders. In that silence, all the years of doctor visits, failed tests, procedures, quiet drives home with my husband's knuckles white on the steering wheel, lived inside my chest like sharp glass. If I let myself, I knew I would cry, and I refused to cry in front of him. "You don't know anything about what I've been through," I said. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed raw. "So keep your science to yourself." He laughed softly, one quick exhale that wasn't amused so much as dismissive. "You're too sensitive. That's the problem these days. People can't handle the truth." I saw it then. The way he glanced at my sister for a split second, seeking approval, and the way she smiled at him with that small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She reached under the table, and I knew she was squeezing his knee, calming him, choosing him, over me. My stomach twisted. "Come on, let's not fight," my sister said, voice sweet. "It's my birthday." A waxy pink candle flickered on the half-eaten cake in the middle of the table. The frosting roses drooped slightly in the warm air. I'd brought the cake, the same kind my sister loved since we were kids. Strawberry filling. Vanilla buttercream. I suddenly hated it. My nephew finally looked up, eyes darting between us, his fork suspended over his plate. My father stared at his water glass like it held the answer to all of this. Mom still hadn't moved her hand from the basket of rolls. Her knuckles were white. "He's not being malicious," my sister added, glancing quickly at me as if trying to soften the blow after it had already landed. "He's just straightforward, brutally honest." She said it like it was admirable, and something in me cracked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was like a hairline fracture in a bone that had been under pressure for far too long. He leaned forward, elbows on the table now, clearly enjoying the attention, the tension, the way the whole room had bent around his words. "Look, I'm just saying, it's tragic, sure. But maybe it worked out. People your age having kids, higher chance of problems. That's just statistics." He said tragic like he was talking about a canceled TV show. My fork scraped against my plate as I set it down. That sound, that small metallic shriek, cut straight through the air. Everyone's eyes snapped to me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment I saw every smug family dinner, every sarcastic comment he'd made, every time my sister had brushed it off as just who he is. I saw the way my mother shrank when he spoke, the way my father shut down to avoid conflict, the way my sister's laughter wrapped around his cruelty like a soft ribbon. "You're right," I said quietly. His eyebrows lifted, surprised. He thought I was agreeing with him. "If I wanted an asshole's opinion," I continued, my voice calm and level as I held his gaze, "I would have farted." For a heartbeat, the room stopped existing. Then my father choked on his water. My nephew burst out laughing first, an involuntary, shocked bark that he tried and failed to smother with his hand. My mother's lips parted, and a little horrified giggle slipped out before she could stop it. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, like it didn't want to miss any of this. My sister's jaw dropped. "What did you just say?" she whispered. Ethan's face changed color so fast it was almost fascinating. First pale, then bright red, like someone had lit a match under his skin. His mouth opened and closed once, twice. No sound coming out. I didn't look away. I held his eyes with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. "That was uncalled for," he finally said. Voice low, shaking slightly. "You're really going to insult me in front of everyone because you can't handle the truth." "You insulted my entire existence over dessert," I said. "I just returned the favor." Another ripple of laughter traveled around the table, smaller this time, nervously smothered behind napkins and coughs. But it was there. It was real. He heard it. So did my sister. The air shifted. He pushed his chair back abruptly, the legs scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to sit here and be disrespected," he snapped. My sister stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled. "Ethan, wait!" He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, avoiding my eyes now, his practiced composure cracked wide open. "Enjoy the rest of your night," he muttered, more to the room than to anyone in particular. He walked out of the dining room, footsteps heavy, and my sister hurried after him, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. The murmur of their voices rose in the hallway, sharp and hot, then faded as the front door opened. Cold air rushed in from the hallway for a second before the door slammed shut. Silence settled over the table like dust. My mother looked at me, eyes wide and uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether to scold me or thank me. My father stared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. My nephew's shoulders shook as he pressed his lips together, trying not to smile. The candle in the middle of the cake flickered and went out on its own, a thin thread of smoke winding up toward the chandelier. I picked up my fork again with hands that suddenly wouldn't stop trembling, knowing deep down that whatever I'd just set in motion wasn't going to end with one slammed door and a ruined birthday cake. The hallway was still heavy with the echo of the front door when my sister walked back in, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her face streaked with embarrassment and anger. She didn't sit. She hovered near the doorway like she wasn't sure if she wanted to rejoin us or run after him again. The rest of us stayed frozen in a strange, suspended quiet. Forks paused, breaths shallow, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile air. I kept my eyes on my plate, though I wasn't really seeing anything. My pulse thudded in my throat. My hands rested in my lap, fingers interlaced so tightly the bones ached. "He's upset," my sister finally said, her voice tight, clipped at the edges. "He feels humiliated." No one answered. The silence stretched long enough that the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen sounded unnaturally loud. She turned that brittle gaze toward me. "You didn't have to go that far." A small part of me wanted to look up at her, but a larger part refused to offer even that much. I kept my eyes lowered. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her chair creaking under her. My father cleared his throat. My nephew locked his phone screen and set it face down, like even the lifeless device didn't deserve to see the tension unfolding. "He asked about something incredibly personal," my mother murmured, voice soft as if afraid she might crack something. "He shouldn't have. He was just being honest," my sister snapped, cutting her off. "That's how he is. You all know that by now. You could have ignored him. You could have brushed it off, but instead you deliberately embarrassed him in front of the whole family." She said deliberately, like she'd caught me committing a crime in broad daylight. I finally lifted my head. Her eyes were glossy, but not with sadness. Embarrassment, anger, frustration, maybe even some cocktail of defensiveness she didn't want to examine too closely. I recognized the way her jaw tightened. It was the same look she used to give me when we were teenagers and I'd accidentally ruin her favorite shirt or forget to pick her up from practice. Except now she was 27 and somehow the stakes had become infinitely heavier. "He embarrassed himself," my father said quietly, surprising all of us. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at my sister. He just spoke as if stating a simple fact. "He crossed a line." My sister's mouth dropped open slightly, not in shock, but in the disbelief of someone who expected loyalty to fall automatically in her favor. "Dad, seriously? You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides. I'm stating what happened." But she wasn't listening anymore. She had already decided what the narrative was. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling, and typed something quickly, probably a message to him. Her thumbs moved frantically like she believed she could undo what had already exploded across the table. My mother tried to help, as she always did when she sensed the family slipping into discord. "Let's all calm down," she said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle in her napkin. "It's still your birthday. We can salvage the evening." But no one at the table seemed capable of salvaging anything. When my sister finally put her phone down, her voice had acquired that coldness she rarely used on me, sharp, controlled, rehearsed. "He left because he felt attacked. He said he's not coming back tonight." I swallowed the knot forming in my throat. My nephew let out a low whistle under his breath, then quickly hid behind a cough when my sister glared at him. "You shouldn't have told him about your infertility issues," she continued. "He didn't mean to pry. You could have said it was personal. You didn't have to make a scene." A laugh, quiet, humorless, broke out of me before I could stop it. "I did say it was personal." "Well, you didn't say it nicely enough." I stared at her, stunned at the absurdity of that sentence. The way she said nicely, as if the burden of politeness had always belonged to me. as if I owed him grace he never extended to anyone else. My mother looked helplessly between us. My father picked up his fork and set it back down, the metal scraping against porcelain. He was restless, uncomfortable, but unwilling to pour gasoline on the flames. My sister pulled out her chair abruptly and sat down with purpose. Like sitting would assert some kind of authority she believed she'd lost. She crossed her legs and folded her hands neatly in her lap. "You're older," she said after a breath. "You should know better." The weight of those words pressed against my chest. Older. As if age came bundled with eternal responsibility for everyone else's emotional comfort, even those who attacked me unprovoked. "He insulted me," I said, my voice low. "He didn't insult you," she argued. "He made an observation. You chose to take offense." My nephew snorted softly, unable to help himself this time. My sister shot him a look that could curdle milk. He shrugged, muttered something about needing more water, and fled to the kitchen, the faucet turning on seconds later. The room felt colder with every passing moment. Even the candle on the cake, now extinguished, sat there like an omen. Celebration turned to smoke. "You need to apologize to him," she said at last. "Tonight, he's hurt." I stared at her, slowly absorbing the shock of hearing her say that while my own humiliation still pulsed raw inside me. My mother shifted again, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes met mine briefly, full of conflict, worry, and something resembling guilt. She didn't believe I owed him an apology, but she wasn't going to say it aloud. My father sighed. The long, heavy kind that came from years of watching arguments spiral in this family. "Maybe," he began. "Maybe everyone needs time to cool." "No," my sister snapped. "She needs to apologize. He said he won't come back until she does." I sat there absorbing that. He won't come back until I apologize. As if his presence in this family were a gift. As if my dignity were the acceptable payment for that gift. My sister watched me with an air of expectation, as if waiting for me to bow my head and make everything easy again. For her. For him. For the version of her life she wanted to protect at all costs. I looked down at my hands, still trembling faintly. My fork lay beside my plate, untouched now, a smear of gravy cooling slowly into a thin skin. My stomach churned. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. My sister took my silence as defiance. Her face hardened. "If you don't apologize," she said, "you're going to make things really difficult." The room went still. My nephew stepped out of the kitchen at that exact moment, holding a glass of water he clearly didn't need. His eyes flicked between us, sensing something heavier than before. I lifted my head slowly and met my sister's gaze. "What exactly?" I asked quietly. "Is going to get difficult." She opened her mouth, but something in my tone froze her. Something in me had shifted. She sensed it, but she didn't yet understand it. Not fully. Not the part of me that had been chipped, bruised, examined like defective merchandise, and finally found its threshold. Before she could answer, before anyone could break the tension knitting itself into the air like static, the faint vibration of a phone lit up the table. Her phone. A new message from him appeared on her screen. Her eyes widened just slightly, and the way she swallowed told me that whatever he had sent, she didn't want to read aloud. Not in front of us. Not now. I grew up in a house where the walls were thin enough to hear everything, but no one ever spoke the truth aloud. Our home sat on a quiet street lined with old maples that shed their leaves in heavy red drifts each autumn. I used to rake them into piles taller than my waist, just so I could fall backward into them and imagine disappearing for a while. The smell of crushed leaves, damp, earthy, metallic, has stayed with me all these years. Even now, whenever I catch that scent, something in my chest tightens. My parents did their best with what they had, which wasn't much. My father worked long shifts at the paper mill, coming home with his skin smelling faintly of wood pulp and steam. My mother worked evenings at a laundromat, where the machines rattled so violently that she said she could feel the vibration in her bones when she lay down at night. She'd rub her wrists, rolling them like she was winding an invisible thread while telling us stories about her day just to fill the silence. Money was always the unspoken ghost in the house, lingering behind every decision. It hovered in the corners of our kitchen, in the way my father counted cash twice before putting it in the envelope for bills, in the way my mother cut coupons with a concentration that looked almost devotional. Even as a child, I could sense the strain in the very air of our home, though no one ever explained it directly. When my sister was born, I was 8. I remember my father lifting her carefully, the way someone might hold a fragile bird, and I remember thinking she looked like a tiny moon, round, pale, impossibly delicate. My mother placed her in my lap, and I studied her tiny fingers curled into soft fists. She smelled like warm milk and powder. I didn't know it then, but the moment she arrived, something shifted inside me, a sense of responsibility that I didn't choose but grew into like a second skin. I became the helper, the good daughter, the one who could be relied upon. I watched her when my mother worked late. I heated bottles, rocked her when she cried, kept her entertained with silly songs. I brushed her hair before school, tied her shoelaces, packed her lunches when Mom was too tired. I did it because I loved her, but also because no one else could afford to fall apart. As she grew older, she learned to sparkle in ways I never did. She was smaller, prettier, funnier. People gravitated toward her. Teachers adored her. Boys noticed her. She floated through childhood with an ease I'd never had, while I stayed grounded, steady, reliable, unnoticed. And that was all right. Or at least that's what I told myself. By the time I finished high school, college felt like a luxury dreamer's chased. We didn't have the money. I took the first job that would help the family, clerking at a hardware store where the air always smelled faintly of sawdust and oil. I brought home my paycheck every Friday, laying the envelope on the kitchen table beside my father's. It became our ritual. We never talked about it, but we didn't need to. My sister, meanwhile, blossomed. She joined clubs, made friends, dreamed big dreams. I wanted those dreams for her. I wanted her to have everything I never did. When she got accepted into a university 2 hours away, our parents were proud, but the worry lay thick under their smiles. Tuition, books, living expenses. I didn't hesitate. I picked up extra shifts, took on weekend hours, and told her I'd help cover what our parents couldn't. I still remember the way her face lit up. Pure joy unshadowed by fear or hesitation. It made the ache in my feet, the constant exhaustion, the missed holidays feel worth it. During those years, I learned the value of quiet sacrifice, of doing what needed to be done even when no one saw it. I didn't resent her, not then, not when she called excitedly about her new apartment, not when she needed money for textbooks, not when she said she couldn't visit home because she had plans with friends. I told myself this was what big sisters do. They hold up the skies so their younger siblings can grow under sunny skies. My husband came into my life around that time. He was gentle where the world was harsh, steady where I was stretched thin. I met him at a grocery store, of all places. I dropped a jar of pasta sauce and it shattered everywhere. He crouched down to help me, his voice warm as he said, "Well, that jar never stood a chance." It made me laugh, the kind of laugh that cracked something open inside me. He loved quietly, without need for spectacle. He learned the rhythms of my anxiety before I ever spoke them aloud. When we married, my parents cried, but my sister didn't come home for the wedding. "Exams," she said. No one questioned it. Though the empty seat where she should have been stayed with me like a cold spot in an otherwise warm room. After we married, things became tighter financially. We wanted children more than anything. We tried for years. Doctor visits, medications, endless cycles of hope and disappointment. I learned to carry grief in silence, to fold it neatly into my routines like laundry. I told no one how often I cried in the bathroom, the water running so no one would hear. I didn't want pity. I didn't want anyone to look at me with that soft sadness people use when they don't know what to say. When my sister graduated and moved back closer to home, she looked at me differently. Not with malice, just detachment. She had outgrown the world I still lived in. While I worked long shifts and scraped together savings, she moved into a bright apartment with polished floors and walls that didn't need repainting. She got a job that paid well. She bought clothes that looked effortless but cost more than my entire wardrobe. She talked about vacations, restaurants, plans. We still saw each other, but the distance grew like something alive between us. Then she met him, Ethan. I remember the first time she brought him to a family dinner. He walked in with a confidence that filled every room before he did. He shook my father's hand with a firmness that felt performative. He complimented my mother's cooking with an edge of condescension, as if grading a student. He looked at me like I was a line item to be evaluated. When he asked what I did for work, I told him. He nodded slowly, almost pityingly, and said, "That's practical." The word sat between us like something sour. My sister laughed it off. "He's just honest," she said, honest. The same word she clung to every time he dismissed someone. When he told my mother her hairstyle aged her. When he suggested my father should really consider retiring before he becomes obsolete. When he made a joke about my thrift store shoes. I swallowed those moments because that was the shape of my life. Quietly enduring, smoothing edges, carrying weight no one acknowledged. I told myself I was imagining things, that he wasn't that bad, that she deserved someone who adored her sparkle. But there were moments, small, fleeting, when I felt something inside me wear thin, like a thread pulled too tight. Years passed. And the doctor eventually told me the truth I had already begun to suspect. The chances of conceiving were slim. The words were soft, clinical, delivered under bright fluorescent lights that made everything feel sharper. I nodded, holding myself steady. On the drive home, my husband held my hand the entire way. Neither of us spoke. Some griefs don't require language. I kept that pain close, hidden, not out of shame, but because it was mine. It was a tenderness I didn't trust the world to treat gently. Then tonight happened, and he pulled that hidden thread straight into the harsh light of the dining table. The weight of everything I had carried, childhood responsibility, years of sacrifice, decades of quiet endurance, pressed against my ribs until breathing felt like a negotiation rather than an instinct. And yet, even with all that history behind me, something in my sister's boyfriend's words cut in a way I had never experienced before. Not because of what he said, but because of who had sat silently beside him, who had once placed her tiny hand in mine and trusted me with everything. As I sat at the table tonight watching her defend him, something shifted inside me. Not a break, but a realization so sharp it felt almost like one. It wasn't just his cruelty that hurt. It was the growing understanding that she no longer saw me at all. The smell of autumn leaves pressed faintly through my memory then, that childhood scent rising unexpectedly, the earthy, bitter aroma of something decomposing into soil. For the first time, it didn't smell comforting. It smelled like something I needed to finally let rot. I didn't know yet what that meant. I didn't know what it would grow into. But I knew, sitting under the dim dining room chandelier, that something long buried inside me had begun to stir, and it wasn't finished rising. The day after my sister's birthday dinner, the house felt strangely hollow, as if the argument from the night before had seeped into the walls. I stayed longer than I meant to, helping my mother clean up dishes she washed twice just to avoid talking. My father disappeared into the garage the way he always did when the family tipped toward fracture. I watched him walk out, shoulders heavy, back curved just a little more than usual. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing cake plates, when my sister's message arrived. "You owe him an apology. He said he won't speak to me until you fix this." The screen glowed coldly in my hand. I set the phone down without responding. My mother glanced over, pretending not to have read anything, but the way her fingers tightened around a damp dish towel betrayed her. I felt too drained to argue. Silence clung to me like humidity. When I finally drove home, the sky was already dimming. My husband was waiting in the living room, concern softening his features the moment I walked in. He studied me quietly, the way he always did when something in me had shifted. "How bad was it?" he asked. I sat beside him, sinking into the couch, letting my body fold into the cushions as though the furniture might hold me together better than I could myself. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh dramatically. I just told him the truth in small, clipped sentences. He listened without interrupting, his face tightening with disbelief, then anger. "He said what?" he whispered. "How could she sit there and let him—" I shook my head. "I don't want to talk about him anymore." He nodded, though I knew he had more words tucked behind his teeth. That night, I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling. The refrigerator hummed in the distance. A car passed outside, headlights sweeping briefly across the window before fading. My husband's steady breathing warmed my shoulder, but heat couldn't reach the cold place forming inside me. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, my phone buzzed. Another message from my sister. "You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. You always find a way to ruin things. Just apologize." Ruin things. The words lodged themselves like glass beneath my ribs. When morning came, I moved through the house like a ghost. My husband made breakfast, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me without a word. I pushed them around with my fork, appetite gone. He sat across from me, waiting, hoping I'd eventually meet his eyes. "You know none of this is your fault," he said gently. I nodded, but the agreement didn't settle inside me. I still felt the sting of my sister's voice, her disappointment sharper than any insult her boyfriend had thrown. Later that afternoon, I returned to my parents' house to pick up a container my mother said I'd forgotten. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't ignore her. My mother greeted me with a tight smile, hugging me longer than usual, her arms stiff, her breath uneasy. "I told your sister not to push you," she murmured as she held me, "but you know how she gets when she's embarrassed." Embarrassed, a softer word for the same wound. I stepped into the kitchen, noticing the trash bin was full. Cake crumbs, discarded napkins, crumpled foil. The air carried that faint, stale, sweet smell of celebration gone wrong. My mother handed me the container, but her eyes drifted toward the dining room, toward the table where everything had fallen apart the night before. "Your sister. She's upset," she said cautiously. "So am I," I replied. Mother flinched at the edge in my voice. I immediately regretted it, but didn't walk it back. "She says he might not come around anymore," she continued, whispering now, as if afraid the walls might judge her. "She blames herself." That wasn't true. My sister blamed me, entirely. My mother reached for my hand but stopped herself halfway, fingers hovering uncertainly before retreating. "Maybe you two should talk. This is all getting bigger than it needs to be." Her attempt at peacekeeping only added weight to my exhaustion. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the front door clicked open. My sister walked in. Her shoulders were hunched, her hair messier than usual, her eyes puffy from crying, but not the kind of crying that comes from heartbreak. No, this was anger, accusation, raw and unfiltered. The moment she saw me, her expression hardened. "You're here." I nodded. She marched into the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cabinet with more force than necessary. It slammed lightly against the counter. She filled it half full of water, took a sip, then turned to me. "He's refusing to answer my calls," she said flatly. I stayed silent. "He's not answering because of you." I inhaled slowly. "He crossed a line." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "You're unbelievable. You provoked him. You ruined the entire night with your drama." The word struck me harder than she realized. Drama. As if my pain were theatrics. I shook my head faintly. I defended myself. "You humiliated him, in front of everyone." "He humiliated me first," I said. She slammed the glass down this time. Water sloshed over the rim onto the counter. "That's different," she snapped. I looked at her, bewildered. "How?" Because he didn't mean it, she shouted, and the kitchen seemed to shrink around us. Because that's just how he talks. He doesn't sugarcoat things. You know that. My mother murmured, "Girls, please." But my sister barreled on. "He told me he's reconsidering this relationship because of how you behaved. Do you have any idea how that feels? Do you even care?" The question sliced through me. Because it was the first time she'd admitted it, that his opinion mattered more than mine ever had. Before I could form a response, another voice entered the room, my father's, coming from the hallway, tired and hoarse. "That man disrespected your sister," he said. "Don't twist it." My sister's head snapped toward him. "You're siding with her again." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She turned back to me, eyes blazing. "You need to fix this." She stepped closer. Too close. Her anger radiated off her in waves, almost trembling. "Call him," she ordered. "Apologize. Right now." My stomach nodded. "I won't apologize for standing up for myself." "You will if you care about this family," she hissed. Humiliation struck like a sudden gust of cold wind. First blow. Not the petty insult from the night before, but being told that my worth in this family hinged on my willingness to lower myself for a man who delighted in cruelty. I swallowed hard, voice thinning. I've always cared about this family. "Then prove it," she shot back. Second blow. My mother finally stepped forward, placing a hand on my sister's arm, but my sister jerked away with a violent shake. "You don't get to make me look like a fool," she continued. "You don't get to destroy my relationship just because your life isn't perfect." The words stung, not because they were true, but because she meant them. I stepped back as if physically struck. The room spun a little. The overhead lighting felt too harsh, casting stark shadows on her face, sharpening every edge of her contempt. Behind her, the sink dripped steadily. A rhythmic tap. Tap, tap. Each drop landing like a reminder of everything that had eroded slowly over the years. "Say something," she demanded. I opened my mouth, but my voice wouldn't come. The silence stretched unbearably, but she perceived it as defiance. That made her smirk, a cold, satisfied little curve of her lips. And then she delivered the third blow. "You've always been jealous of me." I blinked, once, twice. The accusation knocked the air out of my lungs. Jealous? Of her? After everything I'd given? After all the years I had quietly handed her the very things I had gone without? My throat tightened. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My father exhaled sharply, shaking his head as he walked out of the room, unwilling to hear any more. My mother whispered my name, reaching for me again, finally understanding the depth of the wound. But my sister stared at me with triumph, mistaking my silence for submission. Then came the worst part, the moment that didn't feel like anger or bitterness or even cruelty. It felt like loss. Because when she crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and said, "If he leaves me because of this, that's on you." Something inside me sagged, collapsed quietly the way a structure weakened over years finally gives way with a breath, not a bang. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only feel the cold hum of the refrigerator behind me, the drip of the faucet, the faint tremble in my fingers. My sister waited for me to break, but I didn't. I simply turned away, and in the silence that followed, I heard her inhale sharply, as if she sensed that something in me had changed in a way she couldn't control or reverse. The faucet dripped again. Then again. And in that rhythmic tapping, something inside me began to harden, not into anger, not yet, but into a stillness so deep it frightened even me. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I left my parents' house without another word. The air outside was cold enough to sting, sharper than it had been the day before. I walked to my car with my keys clenched so tightly my palm felt bruised. My sister didn't follow me. She didn't call my name. She didn't even look through the window as I drove away. It was almost a relief. The drive home blurred past in long stretches of pavement and muted gray sky. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the argument. My mind felt strangely quiet, flattened by exhaustion. When I pulled into the driveway, my husband came out almost immediately, as if he'd been watching for my headlights. "You're home," he said softly. I nodded. He reached for my coat, sliding it off my shoulders with gentle hands, but I stood stiff beneath his touch. Something inside me was still trembling, like a cord plucked too hard and left vibrating. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. No, but I did. But I didn't know how. I sank onto the couch. He sat beside me, careful not to crowd me. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. My phone buzzed again, and I didn't have to look to know it was her. I flipped it face down on the coffee table. "We don't have to respond to anything tonight," he murmured. "You don't owe anyone your peace right now." A small breath escaped me, half sigh, half something more fragile. He reached for my hand, but I hesitated. Not because I didn't want comfort, but because I felt something shifting inside myself that I couldn't quite name yet. The shift arrived the next morning. My sister sent a long message, paragraph after paragraph filled with accusation, guilt, demands. The same melody, sung louder. I read it without reacting. My chest didn't tighten. My stomach didn't twist. It all felt distant, like reading someone else's argument. Then, near the end of the message, I saw the line that changed everything. "Mom said you should apologize too. You're making this harder than it has to be." That wasn't true. I had stood in the kitchen. I had heard my mother's voice. I had seen the worry, yes, but not condemnation. My sister was using her, again. Something inside me snapped. Not violently this time, not like the crack at the dinner table. This was quieter, cleaner, like a thin thread being cut with deliberate precision. I opened my message thread with my mother and typed, "Did you tell her I should apologize?" Her reply came quickly. "No, I told her everyone needed time. I didn't say you were wrong." I stared at the screen, letting the truth settle over me like a slow, deep breath. My sister had lied, not just misinterpreted, lied. And suddenly, the last 24 hours shifted into focus with startling clarity. She wanted control. She wanted alignment. She wanted me to bend, not for family harmony, but for him. My mother's next message arrived. "I'm sorry she's putting you in the middle of this." But for the first time, I realized I wasn't in the middle. I was the target. My husband came into the room just then, holding a cup of tea he'd made for me. I looked up at him, and something in his face softened as if he could see the exact moment something inside me realigned. "What happened?" he asked gently, setting the cup on the table. I handed him the phone with the messages. He read silently, his jaw tightening. "She lied," he whispered. "Not just lied," I said. "She wanted to use Mom's voice to pressure me, to make me feel alone." He looked at me with something like fierceness. "You're not alone." For a moment, I let that truth rest inside me, warm, steady, real. But behind it, a different realization took root, sharp, cold, undeniable. This would not stop on its own, not with silence, not with patience, not with me bending to keep peace. It would only stop when I drew a line deep enough that she could no longer pretend not to see it. My husband sat beside me, watching my expression change. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I exhaled slowly. "I'm done letting them decide who I am in this family." It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was clarity, the kind you feel in your bones, not your breath. My phone buzzed again, a new message from my sister. "To be clear, I'm expecting a written apology by tonight." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message. Not unread, just unwelcome. My husband leaned closer. "What are you going to do?" I stood from the couch, feeling the weight in my chest shift from ache to something steadier, heavier, more rooted. "I don't know yet," I said. but I know what I won't do." He rose with me, watching as I picked up my coat, not to leave, but to move, to think, to breathe somewhere that wasn't thick with obligation. The air outside was crisp, the sky pale. A quiet morning, indifferent to the turmoil it mirrored inside me. I walked down the driveway, letting my feet carry me further without destination. My breath made small clouds in the cold, each exhale a release I hadn't given myself in years. And then, halfway down the street, my phone vibrated again. But this time it was a message I hadn't expected. Not from her, not from him, from someone else entirely. I looked at the screen, and when I read the first line, everything in me stilled. The message was from my nephew. I stood there on the sidewalk, cold air biting at my cheeks, watching his name pulse on the screen. For a second, I wondered if he'd sent it by mistake, some meme or video he meant to share with a friend. Then I opened it. "Auntie, I don't know if I should send this," the first line read. "But I feel like you deserve to know." My fingers tightened around the phone. Below his text was a screenshot, a group chat. I recognized my sister's name, Ethan's, 2 other contacts I didn't know. The preview alone made my stomach drop. I tapped the image to enlarge it. Ethan. Dinner with her family was a circus. I just said the truth and she exploded. She's so bitter. No kids, nothing going on in her life. No wonder she's so sensitive. Another line. Ethan. And honestly, her whole sad infertility story is dragging everyone down. I was doing her a favor. My sister had replied, "Don't worry about her. She always plays the victim. She'll calm down once she realizes she overreacted. She's good at that." I read it twice to be sure I hadn't misinterpreted it. My chest felt oddly hollow. Then another message from Ethan. "Low-key. I don't want you inviting her around my friends. I don't need them thinking we're connected to that kind of drama. Maybe keep some distance. She's dead weight anyway." Dead weight. The world around me seemed to narrow to that phrase. The street, the sky, the houses, they all faded behind the white glow of the screen. My nephew had written underneath the screenshot, "Mom left her phone on the table and I saw this by accident. I took a picture. I know it's wrong, but I don't like the way they talk about you. Please don't tell her I sent this." A car drove by, tires crunching over the asphalt, but the sound barely reached me. There it was. Proof. Not just of cruelty, but of contempt. Not just his, hers. I stared at the messages until my eyes blurred. Then I took a slow breath and typed back. "Thank you for trusting me. I won't mention your name. You did the right thing." I slid the phone into my pocket, suddenly aware of how cold my hands were. I turned and walked back toward the house, each step feeling deliberate, heavier than before. My husband was in the kitchen when I came in, rinsing a mug. He turned as soon as he heard the door. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said plainly, "but I think I'm seeing things clearly for the first time." He watched me closely as I pulled out my phone again and handed it to him. He wiped his hands on a towel before taking it, reading in silence. His jaw flexed as he scrolled. "Wow," he breathed. "Wow." He looked up at me. "This isn't just ignorance. This is cruelty." And she's standing right beside him while he does it. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. The sting was still there, but beneath it was something steadier, like the ground finally settling after a tremor. "I'm done explaining myself," I said, to her, to him, to anyone. He handed my phone back. "What do you want to do?" I thought of my sister's messages, her demands, the way she'd invoked our mother's name as leverage. "I want them to stop thinking they can rewrite reality and have everyone go along with it," I said. "I want them to understand there are consequences." He tilted his head, studying me. "You're not talking about revenge." "No." My voice was quiet. "I'm talking about boundaries, with evidence this time." We sat at the table, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I opened my messages and saved the screenshot to a secure folder. Then I forwarded it to my email, to a cloud backup, to a password-protected drive. It felt almost clinical, methodical. A part of me detached from the hurt and treated it like a file in a cabinet. My husband watched me, not interfering, understanding this was something I needed to do with my own hands. "That's one thing," he said softly. "What else?" I thought about the years of small, invisible slights, the way my sister had left me out of certain events, then brushed it off with casual excuses, the comments Ethan had made at previous dinners, the times my mother had hinted that he made her uncomfortable, but didn't want to cause trouble. I opened my notes app and started typing. Dates, events, comments I remembered clearly. I wasn't trying to invent a case. I was finally acknowledging one that had been building quietly for a long time. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. "Can we talk later? Just us," she wrote. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I replied, "Yes, I'll come by tomorrow." That night, I slept more deeply than I expected. Not peacefully, but solidly. My dreams were strange, hazy, filled with half-formed conversations in rooms that stretched too long, but for the first time in days, I didn't wake up with my heart pounding. The next afternoon, I drove back to my parents' house. The sky was overcast, pressing low, but the air felt calmer. My mother met me at the door, pulling me into the living room where the curtains were half drawn, softening the light. She sat on the couch and patted the cushion beside her. I sat. "I don't like how things are," she said without preamble, "between you and your sister." "Neither do I," I answered. She twisted her hands in her lap. "She's been calling me nonstop, crying, saying you're trying to destroy her relationship." "She's trying to protect him," I said, "no matter what it costs." My mother's eyes filled with worry. "I don't understand why she can't see what he's doing. Every time we're all together, he says something off. I always tell myself I'm too sensitive, but then I look at your father and I see it in his face too." I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. "I need to show you something," I said quietly, "and I want you to think about it before you tell me what you think I should do." She frowned gently, then took the phone when I handed it to her. Her eyes scanned the screenshot, moving slowly, her expression changing as she read line after line. Her hand flew to her mouth when she reached the part where he called me dead weight. She didn't speak for a long moment, then she whispered, "He said this about you? And she just agreed?" I nodded. Tears filled her eyes, not the kind that escape quickly, but the kind that build slowly, heavy and hot. "I knew he was rude," she said. "I didn't know it was this." Her voice shook. "I didn't know she would talk about you like this." I let her sit with it, let her see it with her own eyes, not filtered through anyone's retelling, not softened by my hesitation or her excuses. Finally, she lowered the phone. "What are you going to do?" I took a breath. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to insult him again. That's what she expects. That's the story she wants to tell about me. I won't give her that." "What then?" my mother asked. "I'm going to show her who he really is. And I'm going to tell her what I will and won't accept from now on." "How?" I glanced toward the dining room, the table still set with its placemats and the faint imprint of last night's tension. "Here," I said, "where everything started." My mother searched my face, torn between fear and relief. "You want us all here? Together?" "Yes, you, Dad, her, him. My husband if he wants to be here. No shouting, no name-calling, just truth." She let out a shaky breath. "He'll deny it. He always does." "He can try," I said, "but I won't be standing there empty-handed this time." There was a small, sharp silence. Then my mother nodded slowly, as if something inside her had finally surrendered to reality. "Your father needs to see this too," she said, lifting the phone. I nodded. "He does. And he needs to know I'm not going to let them use you as a weapon anymore." Her eyes widened slightly. Then she lowered them, ashamed and grateful all at once. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I just wanted to keep the peace." "I know," I said gently, "but peace that depends on one person always swallowing their pain isn't really peace." We sat like that for a while, side by side, the weight of years between us. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and said, "I'll talk to your father tonight. You choose the day. We'll be here." On my way out, my phone vibrated again. A new message, from my sister this time. "If you keep ignoring me, don't bother showing up at any of my future events. I won't be begging you to be in my life," she wrote. For a moment, that hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then something steadier rose up beneath it. I typed back, "We'll talk soon, at Mom and Dad's, all of us." There was a long pause before her reply arrived. "What is this? Some kind of intervention?" I didn't answer, because it wasn't that. It was something else, something quieter and sharper. Later that evening, I sat at the dining table with my husband. We went over what I would say, not scripting every word, but anchoring myself in certain truths I didn't want to lose in the swirl of emotion. "I won't apologize," I said, "but I also won't be cruel. I'll show them what they said. I'll tell them how it landed, and then I'll tell them what life with me will look like going forward, depending on what they choose." He nodded. "And if they deny it?" "I still have the screenshot and my memory. I don't need their permission to decide what I'll tolerate." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll be there with you," he said. The knot in my chest loosened just enough to breathe. We chose a day. We chose a time. My parents confirmed. My sister replied with a curt, "Fine." Ethan sent a single thumbs-up emoji to the group chat my mother created for the occasion. On the morning of the meeting, I woke before my alarm. The house was quiet. I showered, dressed, and tied my hair back, not to look impressive, but to feel steady, practical, present. My husband drove us to my parents' house. We didn't talk much. The silence between us wasn't empty, though. It was full of understanding. As we pulled into the familiar driveway, I saw my father's car, my sister's, and a sleek, dark one I recognized as Ethan's. All lined up in a row. My heart pounded once, hard. I slipped my phone into my pocket, feeling the shape of it against my palm like a small, solid anchor. We walked up the steps together. At the door, I lifted my hand to knock. Before I could, it swung open, and Ethan was standing right there, blocking the entrance, his expression already set in that cool, calculating calm he liked to call honesty. He stood in the doorway like he already owned the house, one hand on the frame, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to signal dominance without seeming overt. It was calculated, the casual stance of a man who believed he had the upper hand before a single word was spoken. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. My husband's presence at my back steadied me. We entered, and the warm smell of my mother's cooking hung in the air. Over-seasoned, over-boiled, the way she always cooked when she was anxious. My father sat at the dining table, arms crossed, staring at the wood grain as if reading something hidden there. My mother hovered behind him, fingers fluttering nervously at her collar. My sister stood near the far wall, arms folded, anger hardening her features. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, as if the version of me she held in her mind had already been condemned. Ethan walked behind us, the subtle scent of his cologne, clean, sharp, metallic, filling the room the way an expensive pen might leave ink where it didn't belong. Once we were all seated, my sister wasted no time. "Before this gets out of hand," she said sharply, "we need to establish that this wasn't supposed to be dramatic. We're here because she gestured the way someone might gesture toward a misplaced object, blew a harmless comment into a family crisis." My father closed his eyes briefly. My mother touched her forehead. My husband inhaled slowly. I didn't respond. Not yet. Ethan leaned forward, clasping his hands in front of him like he was leading a seminar. "I'll start," he said, "because I think there's been a misunderstanding. I wasn't attacking you. I was stating facts. People get so emotional when faced with truth. His tone was smooth, confident. That confidence grew bolder when my sister nodded at every word, reinforcing him, validating him. I say what others won't, he continued. If that's offensive, that's not my fault. My mother made a small sound under her breath, but he kept talking. You took what I said personally, twisted it, and turned your sister's birthday into a spectacle. And instead of apologizing, you doubled down. That's the real issue. I felt the shift in the room, the tightening, the leaning forward, the expectation that I might crumble or defend myself or attempt to smooth it over like I had for years. But not this time. I set my phone on the table, slowly, deliberately. They all watched it. My sister frowned. What are you doing? I lifted my gaze and looked at her, not angry, not broken, but steady. I'm done letting people rewrite what happened, I said. Ethan laughed quietly. That's dramatic. No, I replied calmly. What you said about me was dramatic. What you said about my infertility was cruel. And what you said about me in private, I saw it instantly. His posture changed. A flicker, half a second of discomfort tightening the muscles around his eyes. My sister's brows knit. What are you talking about? I tapped the phone with my fingertip. Before I say anything, I want you all to see how he talks about me when he thinks no one is watching. My sister scoffed. That's ridiculous. He would never... I opened the image, turned the screen toward her, and slid the phone across the table. The second the group chat screenshot was visible, the world seemed to inhale and freeze. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father leaned forward, squinting, reading every line slowly, carefully. My sister stared without blinking, color draining from her face. Ethan sat back, his jaw tightening, not in shame, but in strategy. She read silently, "She's dead weight anyway." Something in my father snapped audibly, a small exhale that cracked more than air. My mother whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. My sister kept reading. Her whole sad infertility story is dragging everyone down. The tear that fell from her eye surprised even her. She looked up slowly. You said this? About my sister?" Ethan didn't look at her. His eyes were on me, studying me, evaluating next moves. "That's taken out of context," he said. "People vent. It's normal." A short, controlled laugh escaped me. Venting is saying someone annoyed you. Venting is complaining about a bad day. Venting isn't mocking someone's medical trauma and calling them dead weight. My sister swallowed hard. "Tell me you didn't mean it." "I meant," he said carefully, "that she brings unnecessary conflict. It was an exaggeration. Don't be emotional." But my sister wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me. My father took the phone next, his hand unsteady. He read every word again, his breathing slow and heavy. When he placed the phone down, the sound was deliberate, controlled. "I don't want that man in my house again," he said quietly. My sister's head whipped toward him. "Dad!" "No." His voice was sharp, final. "I mean it." Ethan bristled. "With all due respect, you're letting your emotions—" "My emotions?" my father repeated, his voice growing colder. "You sat at my table last night and insulted my daughter. And tonight, I see how you speak about her when she isn't here. That isn't honesty, that's cruelty." The room stilled. For the first time, Ethan seemed uncertain. His hands shifted uncomfortably in his lap. His gaze darted between us, recalculating. My sister stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly. "Why would you send this?" she demanded, turning toward me. "Who even gave you—" "It doesn't matter who sent it," I said. "What matters is that it's real." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. He was upset. He didn't mean—" "Stop," I said gently. She froze. "This is not your burden to carry. It's his." She bowed her head slightly, but the fight inside her wasn't gone, just trembling now, no longer steady. Ethan leaned back, one arm draped over the chair like he was reclaiming the space. But the gesture was forced. His breathing was uneven. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're all reacting to one screenshot. This is why I said she's too sensitive. Everyone gets pulled into her feelings." My husband's chair scraped as he stood. "Say one more thing about my wife," he said quietly, "and see if you can still call it honesty." The room held its breath. Silence wrapped around us, heavy, electric. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but my sister grabbed his arm, warning him with a terrified shake of her head. He pulled his arm away. Then he turned to me. "You enjoy this," he said. "You love being the victim. You love the attention." Something inside me went still, deep still. A solid, quiet kind of still that made the room feel colder. "I spent my entire life taking care of people," I said softly. "There was never room to enjoy anything." The sentence froze the room. My mother's tears fell freely now. My father lowered his head. My husband took a quiet breath. Even my sister seemed struck silent by it. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "So what now?" "You want me to beg for forgiveness? Because that's not happening." "No," I said. "I don't care about an apology." He snorted. "Figures." "What I care about," I said, "is that you don't get to stand in any room with me again and pretend you're better, wiser, or more honest than everyone else. You're a man who hides behind the word honesty because it's easier than admitting you enjoy hurting people." He stiffened. "And I won't allow someone like that near me or my husband. And I definitely won't allow someone like that to dictate the dynamics of my family anymore." My sister blinked rapidly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Please don't do this," she whispered. "Please, you're making it sound worse than—" "No," I said. "I'm telling the truth. The truth you claim to respect so much." Ethan rose from his chair slowly, stiffly. "I'm done here," he said. "And if you think I'll let you ruin my relationship—" "She's not ruining anything," my father snapped. "You did that yourself." My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "You talk about my daughter like she's disposable. I won't allow that. Not in my home." My sister wrapped her arms around herself as if she'd suddenly become cold. "Ethan, don't leave," she whispered. He looked at her then, not with love, not with pain, but with calculation. "You can stay if you want," he said, "but I'm not wasting time being attacked by a family who can't handle honesty." He turned and walked toward the door. My sister stared at his back, torn in half. Her breath shook. Her hands trembled. She took one small step after him, then stopped. She turned to look at me, eyes wet, voice small. "What do I do?" I didn't answer, because it wasn't my decision. It never should have been. She looked at the door again, at him, at us, then slowly, painfully, she made her choice. She went after him. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. My mother gasped. My father muttered a curse. My husband placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, breathing in the silence they left behind. A silence that wasn't suffocating this time, but waiting, because I knew she would come back, and when she did, she wouldn't be the same. My sister didn't call me for 3 days. The first day, I kept my phone within arm's reach, every vibration sending a jolt through me before I saw it was just an email or spam. The second day, I turned my phone face down and forced myself to move through normal life. Laundry, dishes, work, small talk with my husband. The third day, I realized that the empty screen hurt less than the messages she'd been sending before. My parents, though, they called. My mother's voice was soft, worn around the edges. "The house feels different," she said. "Your father keeps walking past the dining room like he expects someone to be there." "Is he okay?" I asked. "He's quieter. But he's proud of you," she said. "He keeps saying—" She finally spoke up. "Took long enough." That made my throat tighten in a way I hadn't expected. In the calm after the confrontation, the anger ebbed, and what remained wasn't triumph. It was a strange mix of grief and relief. I had drawn a line. I had kept my dignity. But I had also watched my sister choose the man who mocked me over the family that had carried her. The cost and the necessity coexisted. On the fourth day, my nephew messaged me again. "Mom and Ethan had a huge fight," he wrote. "She saw more messages on his phone, stuff about other women. I think they broke up." I stared at the screen for a long time. Of course. The cruelty that had turned toward me was never going to stay contained there. Men like him didn't reserve their contempt for one target. It spread slowly, inevitably. I typed back, "Are you okay?" "I'm angry," he replied. "At him, at her, at everything. But I'm glad you showed us. I didn't know how bad it really was until that night." Later that evening, my mother called again. "She came by today," she said quietly, "alone. She cried so hard I thought she'd choke." I closed my eyes, imagining my sister in the kitchen, curling into herself in the same room where she'd once stood over me like a prosecutor. "Did she say anything?" I asked. "She said she feels stupid," my mother replied. "Used. She said she didn't realize how far it had gone until she saw the messages about other women. But she also said she can't believe she talked about you that way. She keeps asking if you'll ever forgive her." The question hung between us. I sat with it for a moment before answering. "I don't know what forgiveness will look like yet," I said, "but I know I can't go back to pretending nothing happened." "I told her that," my mother said, surprisingly firm. "I told her that if she wants you in her life, she has to accept your boundaries, not argue with them, not talk around them, accept them." Something inside me softened at that. My mother, who had spent a lifetime patching over conflict, was finally telling both of us the truth. A week later, my sister texted me, "I'm coming over. I don't want to talk on the phone." My husband raised an eyebrow when I told him. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but let me speak first. If I get lost, help me find my way back." When she arrived, she looked smaller. Her usual polish had faded. No carefully done hair, no perfect eyeliner, no effortless outfit, just a loose sweater, leggings, and swollen eyes. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure she deserved to enter. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, "but I'm not going to make this easy. You need to understand that." She nodded. Stepping inside like every inch of floor was unfamiliar territory. We sat at the kitchen table. My husband moved to the living room, close enough to hear, far enough to give us space. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I watched her twist her hands together the way my mother did, a little echo of the woman who'd raised us. "I broke up with him," she finally said. "I heard," I answered softly. "He was talking to other women," she continued, "calling them options, saying I was intense, controlling, a placeholder until he found something better." Her voice broke. "He used the same words about me that he used about you." I didn't say, "I told you so." The words wouldn't have helped either of us. "I defended him even when he hurt people I love," she whispered. "I let him turn me into someone I don't recognize. I knew he was mean sometimes, but I called it honesty because it was easier than admitting he enjoyed being cruel." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "When I read those messages about you," she said, "I felt sick. Not just because of what he said, because of what I said back. I can't believe those words came out of my mouth about the person who—" She swallowed. "About the person who paid my bills when I was in school, who watched me when I was a baby, who never asked for anything back." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. I needed to stay present, not drown. "I was cruel to you," she whispered, "and I defended a man who saw you as less than human. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I needed to tell you I'm so sorry." The apology landed heavily in the space between us. It didn't magically sew everything back together, but it was real, and that mattered. "I believe you're sorry," I said quietly, "but you're right. I can't pretend it didn't happen. Things will have to change." She nodded, tears spilling over. "I'll do whatever you need. If you don't want to see me for a while, if you only want to talk sometimes, I'll accept it. I just don't want you to disappear from my life completely." I took a breath. "I'm not going to disappear," I said, "but I won't stand in any room where I'm treated like a joke or a burden again. If you ever date someone who talks about me or anyone in this family the way he did and you stay, that will be my sign to walk away, for good." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. "Okay, I understand. And I need you to stop using Mom as a shield," I added. "No more Mom said this when she didn't. If you have something to say to me, say it as yourself, not through someone else." She flinched at that, guilt flashing across her face. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I won't do that anymore." We sat there for a long time, not hugging, not rushing into a tidy reconciliation, just two sisters finally looking at each other without the fog of denial. Eventually, my husband brought us tea, my sister's hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in her world. When she left, she hugged me at the door. It was hesitant at first, then tighter. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. "I'm giving up on the way things were," I said. "Not on you. There's a difference." After she left, the house felt quiet but not empty. Later that week, I visited my parents again. We sat around the same dining table where everything had changed. No cake this time, no candles, just simple food and an ease that felt fragile, but real. At one point, my father put his hand over mine. "I'm sorry it took us so long to protect you," he said. "You did today," I replied. "That counts." Months from now, there will still be remnants of this, little aches, sudden memories. But there will also be something else. A line I drew and didn't step back over. A moment I chose myself, not at the expense of my family, but for the health of it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like more than a supporting character in my own life. I felt like the one holding the pen. When I was a girl, I used to fall backward into piles of autumn leaves, just to disappear for a while. Back then, that smell, sharp and earthy and fading, felt like a place to hide when the world was too heavy. Now, when I catch that scent, it doesn't feel like escape anymore. It feels like a reminder that some things are meant to fall away, so something sturdier can grow in their place. If any part of my story pressed on a bruise you've been carrying, tell me. I've spent so much of my life holding up other people's skies. I'd like to hear how you've learned to stand under your own.